In the TV show, I don't know if you call it a TV show, it's a series called The Chosen. It's about the life of Jesus. They do a lot of things where they're kind of reading between the lines. Or sometimes they do a lot of things where they just take exactly the bluntness of Scripture for granted, and they say, we're going to put this on TV, and so they have these really funny moments and the really cool things that happen, and they do a lot of things that I really appreciate, how they kind of extrapolate how some of these things may have happened, how some of these things may have taken place in the story, and then there's a storyline for a lady who's the wife of Peter, who's getting more and more tied up with this preacher named Jesus, and more and more of his time is getting taken up, and more of his dedication is getting poured into Jesus, and he's about to start traveling with Jesus, and people already dug a hole in her roof, and like all this, and she's got a sick mom, and there's all this stuff kind of going on in her life that she feels like she can't say anything about because her husband, how can I complain about this? Oh, he's with Jesus. He's doing these great things. How can I complain about it? But you can see her kind of developing this sense of anxiety that's just building and building and building in her life. And then one day they're about to leave, and Jesus shows up in the room. He says, I want to say something. I see you. I see you. I know you're worried. I know this is a heavy burden. I know you're struggling with what's going on, but hear me. I see you. And one of the things that we have to learn when we start learning about Jesus is that this calling he puts on our lives will cost us. It will cost us something. There will be times when we can't just go along with the crowd. There will be times when we can't just do whatever we want to do. There will be times when, as business leaders, you can't just cut a corner to make a profit. Or there's times in high school or middle school where you can't just believe everything your friends believe. Or you can't just go along with the crowd. You have to break with the room at some point. And this is not going to be a sermon today about how ministry is an especially hard thing. It's going to be a sermon today about how following Jesus is a difficult thing. And it will cost you. And in fact, no one knows this better than Jesus. No one knows what the cost of the gospel costs you better than Jesus does. It's going to cost him his entire life. And every step of the way, there's going to be these moments that show up in the life of Jesus where everything is going to become flooded. The future is going to be flooding into his mind. And everyone else is happy. Everyone else is stoked. Everyone's excited. And he's going, man, if I'm going to follow through with this mission, it's going to cost me immeasurably. And to be like our Savior, to follow in his footsteps, it will at times cost you. And it's fascinating because so far in this series through the book of Mark, if you have your Bibles open up to Mark chapter 6, by the way, Mark chapter 6, so far in this series we have learned that Jesus is either the unstoppable force or the immovable object. We don't know which he is, but he's one of them, right? He's one of them. And we've learned that he is a king who has shown up, and he shows up like Frank Sinatra. He's going to do it his way. He doesn't care what you think, all right? He doesn't care what you say. He doesn't care what rules are in line. He's going to do what he wants to do. And then last week we learned that he's a king who fights. He's a king who's not going to just stand there and say, okay, forces of evil, do whatever you want to do. No, he's going to stop them in their tracks. And it's easy to start learning this about Jesus and realize, man, this guy's just brutal. He's just he's straight out of a Ford commercial. He's like a rock. No one can stop him. And he is. He's actually the rock of our salvation. Everything we have is built on him. He's actually called in the Bible the cornerstone. That's an actual rock that everything else gets built upon. But today I want you to hear me, because you cannot lose this aspect of Jesus. He is also a king who feels. He doesn't apologize to you and me for the fact that this mission is going to cost us to follow him. But he does feel it. He does feel that burden that gets put on you. He does understand that there's a pressure and there's a urgency and there's a frustration that may come along with it, or that may just find you. And so far in the book of Mark, and in chapter 6 in particular, what's happening in Jesus' life and his disciples' life is they have this one moment where they split up. It doesn't happen very often. Usually they're just sitting there and they're hanging out with Jesus, and Jesus does cool things and they're just kind of around. But today he goes, hey, I want you to go out. I want you to go share the good news of the kingdom. It's like a precursor of the book of Acts. One day it's going to be all you, baby. Go do it. You're going to build the church. Go do it. But today it's kind of a practice round. I'm going to give you a couple days to go do it yourself. And they split up. And they go start teaching about the kingdom, about Jesus Christ. And Jesus, in the book of Mark, cuts to this other scene. We don't know if it's just, hey, we don't have a great way to put this, so I'm just going to give you a background idea of what's going on. Or if someone came and told him. But we find out that Jesus' cousin, John the Baptist, has been killed by the king. And so they go out and they start teaching in the villages and surrounding areas, and they come back. Somehow, Jesus found out that John the Baptist is dead, his cousin, not just his cousin, but he was the forerunner of the Messiah. Their ministries are just entangled from beginning to end. The two of them go together, and this guy's gone now. And so the disciples come back, and it says this: the apostles gathered around Jesus, and they reported to him all they had done and taught. You won't believe it. We actually went out there and did what you told us to do, and people believed us, and they listened to us. Great things happened. We healed. We drove out demons. We did these things. You won't believe it. They came back on this high. They came back on this journey. They're going, you will not believe what we just did. And then, because so many people were coming and going that they did not even have a chance to eat, he said to them, come away with me by yourselves to a quiet place, and let's get some rest. Jesus, did you hear us? We're just telling you about, look at all the people. You sent us out. Go tell people. We came back. There's people. Look, have you ever been to anywhere in church where the primary question was not centered around how many people showed up? And they're like, Jesus, we're doing it. We're getting the people showing up. Come on. And his response is not, we got to strike while the iron's hot. Let's just go do something. Let's really nail these guys. Let's make them to where they can never leave us again. And he goes, guys, what we need to do right now is get out of Dodge. And this story is such a wandering story that we're going to hear today that I have no guarantee we're going to get out on time. Where the disciples show up, and they're way up here, and Jesus is way down here. And the fascinating thing about the story is that Jesus is the miracle worker. He's the one that heals sick kids, brings family members back from the dead. People need help, he helps them. And yet when it's his family, when it's his heart that's breaking, when it's his burden to carry, he doesn't lift a finger to stop it. And he's interacting with his disciples, and they're way up here. And I think he knows they're about to find themselves way down here, and they don't know it. And he's like, I'm going to have to help you learn a more important lesson than just when you go out there and start preaching about the kingdom, you're going to have good results. I need to help you understand something, because here's the deal. You and I do not get to hang our hats on any emotional or spiritual high we might find ourselves in. We don't get to say, this is where I am, I'm staying here forever, because just as quickly as you got there, it can leave you. The goal of the Christian life is not to say, how do I just stay up here forever and never leave? You can't do it. Anyone who says you can is lying to you, or on drugs. I don't know which one it is, but I know some people on drugs are not very happy either, so they spend a lot of time down here too. You can't do that. You have to figure out, how do I navigate this life even when there's ups and there's downs? And Jesus says, if you're way up here and you're way down here, you get the same prescription. Go get with God. Spend some time in prayer and find rest for your souls. And so they went by themselves to a solitary place. They got on a boat. They went across the lake. But many who saw them leaving recognized them, and they ran on foot to all the towns and got there ahead of them. That's the group, all right? It's like, what about Bob out there? They can't get rid of these people. They're like, we're gonna take a boat across the lake, And they run around the lake and beat them and find more people, by the way. They're going, hey guys, Jesus is going this way. Let's go find him. And they get out of the boat and they're like, man, you left us, but don't worry, we're here. Don't worry, we're all together again. And Jesus looks at him and goes, don't you people ever take a hint? No. It says when Jesus landed and he saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them. He felt their needs. He felt what they were needing. He felt that they were in need of encouragement or some love or some care. And he had compassion on them because he saw that they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he did what he always does when he finds himself surrounded by people. The first thing, he's not start healing people. What's the first thing? And he began teaching them many things. Hey, listen, I know I'm tired. I know I'm in the worst part of my life. I know I'm going through this sort of pit of just exasperation and just frustration, but I see you're like sheep without a shepherd. I see you need some encouragement. I see you need some love right now. Let me pour into you. Hey, there's good news. The kingdom is here. The grace of God is here. It's available to everybody. Let me teach you many things. And here's what's a fascinating thing. It goes with my understanding of the Bible that I read, and it goes with my experience. That as a Christian, as a person who's part of a church, you might find yourself in a pit of frustration. You might find yourself in a pit of hardship, or I just need some rest. I need some time to myself. But even on that day, God might tap you on your shoulder and say, not today, guys. Today, it is your turn to pour into someone else. Even though you're frustrated yourself, even though you're exasperated right now yourself, this mission is going to cost you. You can't just say, I'm cutting everybody out. I got to think about me today. You can do that later. But God sometimes is going to say, nope, I know you could use encouragement yourself, but today I'm calling on you, not the other person. And the question is, on those moments, are we going to cowboy up, or we're going to step up to the plate and say, all right, let me put my stuff behind me for a minute and just hear what's going on for you. And that's what Jesus does. He sees these people. I'm going to put the fact that I have a death in my family behind me for a minute. I'm going to put the fact that my disciples get everything wrong all the time. Even though they got this right, they're still kind of getting things wrong right here. Let me put all that behind me and let me care for you guys and teach you many things. And he taught them, and he taught them, and he taught them, and he taught them. And the disciples started checking their sundials, and they're going, wait, the sun's getting lower, and I'm getting hungry, and they're getting hungry, and they're getting antsy, and they're becoming hungry people. And hungry people become hangry people. And they're going, wow, this is... They start doing the little really polite, coughing and stuff, and they walk up to Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, this is a remote place. And it's already very late. And so remember that whole thing about us and rest and solitude and that thing? It was your idea, remember that? So why don't you send them away so they can get something to eat? And Jesus said, you give them something to eat. I know you're worried about time. I know you're worried about all these people. And I know you guys, you never plan ahead, so I know you didn't bring any food. And I know grocery stores won't be open for another 2,000 years. But you give them something to eat. And Jesus is saying, listen, guys, this mission is not just going to cost me. It's going to cost you. These people being hungry and in need of some compassion is not just a me problem. It's a you problem. And today, I'm putting it on your plate to figure this out. And the easiest way to know if God's saying, hey, it's your turn to do something, is if Jesus is standing there physically saying, it's your turn to do something. Normally, we got to kind of read the tea leaves and figure this out, have some discernment, but not when Jesus is actually standing in the room. He kind of cut straight through that. And so he says, how many loaves do you have? Go find how much bread we got. What do we have? Do we have anything to give them? And They come back, and they come back with a really kind of a weird number. They say, Jesus, we have 5 loaves and 2 fish. 5 plus 2 equals 7. Now, this is a weird thing. The Bible has this thing about numbers, and oftentimes numbers, depending on what they are, can have a deeper meaning and a deeper reality the Bible's trying to tell us about. 7 is one of those numbers that has, starting all the way back in the book of Genesis, so it came to be understood as a number that stood for perfection, or in this case, I think it's certainly this other one, which is completion. Having the complete amount of something. Another one of those numbers is the number 12, by the way. It stands for completion. And so Jesus says, hey, we got 5,000 people here. We need to feed them. You give them something to eat. And they come back and they say, we have 7 items of food. That's all we have. And Jesus goes, that's the complete amount that I'm asking you for. I'm not asking you for all of it. I'm not asking you for everything. I'm not asking you to solve everybody's problems. I'm asking you to do what I'm asking you to do. You do what you're able to do, and Jesus will take it from there. Which is an important point for us, because I know some of us like to just never interact with other people's problems, and some of us like to get so deep in them. We have, you get these savior complexes or something like that. These things where you say, I can help this person, I can do this. And here's the deal. If you comfort somebody, if you give some counsel or you just encouragement to somebody in a moment and you can't solve all their problems, that's not your problem. I almost guarantee you Jesus is not asking you to solve all of somebody else's problems. But he may be asking you to love somebody and just say, hey, how can I talk? How can I listen? How can I just encourage you right now? And so Jesus says, I have the complete amount. You have the complete amount of what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for everything, just for what you have. And Jesus takes what they have and he breaks it and he hands it out. He breaks it and hands it out. And as he's breaking it, it spreads and it spreads and it spreads and it grows and it grows and it grows until everybody can eat and everybody has what they need. Everybody's full. Nobody's hungry anymore. Nobody's left out. And it's fascinating. He says this. It says, Jesus directed them to have all the people sit down in groups on green grass. Isn't that funny? The Lord is my shepherd. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And Jesus is here going, oh, these are like sheep without a shepherd. I'm going to make you all sit down in the grass real quick. And they all eat. And then they all ate. And then Jesus says, now you go pick up all the leftovers. You disciples, just go pick it up. And the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish. Another number for completion. And what Jesus is saying is, listen, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you. But I'm not here to just leave you empty-handed. I'm here to take care of you too. I'm here to take care of you too. So you giving bread to the people did not leave you without bread yourself. You giving encouragement to someone else is not there to leave you without getting encouragement yourself. You to love for someone else is not there just so you get left without love for yourself. No, Jesus is going to take care of you too. And so Jesus is not here to leave you empty-handed. And this story, I'm going to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. The story is heading towards this weird line that says this. Their hearts were hardened because they did not understand about the loaves. Okay? I'm going to do a little bit of a, Inception type movie filmmaking type thing here. I'm going to give you the ending real quick. He's about to say that. They just lived through this loaf story right now where they gave bread to the people and that ended up giving them bread to eat as well. And there's something that we need to understand about that when we don't, it's going to harden their hearts, the people who interact with God, because they don't understand what Jesus is trying to teach them. And so, Jesus does this whole thing. I've cared for the people. They were in need. I put my burdens behind me. I'm going to let them go have their time. Disciples, you get out of Dodge. I'll dismiss the crowd. And then he does that. They get in the boat. They head out. And Jesus finally gets up on a mountainside, can have some quiet time himself. And he's praying. And while he's praying, he can look down into the water and he sees that the disciples got caught in a huge wind in a rough sea. And they're rowing, and they're rowing, and they're rowing, and they're rowing. and they're not making any progress. Think about where they were one day ago. Jesus, you'll never believe what we did for you. Life's awesome. This whole mission thing is going to be great. And now they're in the water, rowing against the waves, against the wind. They're going, how do we keep ending up here? Why do we keep doing this? How does this keep happening? We were happy like 12 hours ago. And Jesus is looking down, and I'm going to quote from the ESV. It says this, and he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. It was about the fourth watch of the night, and he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them. Okay, that's a weird line right there. If you're in a dangerous area, you still got to sleep, still got to survive the night, either on a boat or in the military or whatever. How do you survive going to sleep when you have dangerous things all around you? The Romans came up with a watch system. There's 4 watches in the night, 6 to 9 p.m., 9 to 12, 12 to 3, 3 to 6. They're in the 4th watch. 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, rowing, no progress. And Jesus walks by on the water. And they think he's a ghost, and there's a whole thing about all that sort of stuff. And eventually he says, no, guys, it's okay. It's me. And he gets in the water, and he gets in the boat. Everything calms down, and they get to the other side okay. And they're with Jesus again. And it says, they were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves, and their hearts were hardened. Here's where I'm going to land today. Being a follower of Jesus does not guarantee you that your life's going to go perfectly. Being a follower of Jesus does not guarantee you that every little desire of your heart is going to be said, yes, you can have it all. All your problems are gone. All your taxes are just going to be forgiven like nothing ever happened. You're going to get random checks in the mail so you can be a millionaire even though you don't do anything just because God loves you so much. No. 4th watch nights happen. Seasons of life where you row against the wind and row against the waves happen. Times where Jesus says, no, you have to encourage someone else. They're not going to encourage you. Happens. The mission will cost you. But there's a fascinating line in there that says, he meant to pass by them. Now, this is something that when I get lunch with Steve this week, he may argue with me for 3 hours because I'm going to say something that he probably won't agree with, but we'll see. It's not that big of a gamble because what does it matter what he thinks? But the word, when you just read it English, and it says, they're struggling. And Jesus walks on the water, and he meant to pass by them. What it sounds like when you read it is, he meant to just leave them there. He meant to just say, I'm not struggling like you, see ya, and go. But the idea of passing by, God passing by in the Bible goes back to the book of Exodus. A man named Moses. And Moses asked God the most amazing question that none of us ever really have the nerve to ask him because we don't love God like Moses loved God. And he said, God, I want to see your glory. I want to see your glory. I want to see you for who you are. And God goes, you can't. It'll kill you. And then they're like 2 best friends in a cave going, okay, maybe we can figure this thing out. Okay, what if I kind of like hide you in a little nook in this corner over here? I'll put my hand over your eyes and I'll pass by you. And then I'll let my hand go right at the last second. You can see the back of my shirt as I'm leaving. Maybe that's how I can get close to you. And so the premise of the idea of God passing by people is not the idea that God's trying to get away from people, but that God's actually figuring out how to get close to people. And so when it says he meant to pass by them, maybe what it's saying is, of all the directions Jesus could have walked, of all the places he could have been right there, of all the gin joints and all the airports of all the world, he chose to pass by that point, at that moment, in that storm, with that group of people right there, struggling at the waves and the winds and the oars and making no progress. Maybe he meant to pass by them just so he could say, I see you. I know you're having a hard time. I know you're not here anymore. You're way down here, but hear me. I see you. I feel that burden. I understand that pain. I see what you're struggling with. I see you. I'm in a season, I used to have a superpower. I have two superpowers, really. One is I like anybody. I still have that superpower. I'm waiting on that one, but I still have it. And the other superpower I had was I could sleep anywhere. I could sleep like a log. I was the king of sleeping. And that was a wonderful superpower to have. But I'm in a season in my life where I spend more time awake at 4 o'clock in the morning than ever in my life. Not being productive, just laying there, not able to get back to sleep, just going, man, will I be a good enough pastor? Will these people make it through this? Will we get the finances? Will this thing work out? What will this get communicated? Will this thing happen over here? Will that? And it's just this sort of just straining at the oars, fighting the winds, fighting the waves. And I'm sure that you've had plenty of seasons in your life that were fourth watch seasons, where you were rowing and you were fighting and you were straining and you were going. And the fourth watch straining and rowing they're not inspirational stories. They're not stories of how you overcame and you made it through. It's moments where you strain and strain and strain and make no progress. And what Jesus is saying in those fourth watch nights is, I see you. I see you. I've meant to come passing by right now. And many of us spend the hardest seasons of our lives without any conception that Jesus sees us. Without any idea that he's right there in the middle of it with you. We spend the hardest seasons of our lives thinking, I'm all alone. No one cares. No one feels this but me. But in Jesus Christ, we have a king who feels. We have a king who shows up and is right there saying, hey, listen, I know it's going to cost you. I know there's burdens. I know there's hardship. I know there's things going on. But you're not doing it alone. And the question we have to ask is, how can we live into the presence of God in our lives that is going to be there? How can we actually acknowledge it? How can we actually say, God, I'm going to trust you to help me through? How can we do that? Well, Jesus already told us. The prescription, if you're way up here or way down here, is the same. Get away. Find rest for your soul. And spend time with God. Read his words. Read the Bible. Open the God. We're going through the book of Mark. Why don't you read through the book of Mark on your own quiet time? Let the words of Scripture infect your heart on its own without some preacher telling you what you should think about it. Certainly not some Greek teacher what you should think about it, right? Just let the Lord speak to you himself. Because in Jesus Christ, we have a king who feels the burdens and feels the pains that we have to often go through. And sometimes we got to go through it because we follow Jesus, because God's leading us that way, because God asks us to deal with that. And we need to trust that Jesus can be there for us. The night that Jesus was going to be crucified, he knelt down in a garden And all his friends were telling him, hey, whatever happens tonight, Jesus, we're there for you. We'll never let you down. He says, all right, well then can you come away and pray with me? And he goes and he prays. And they all fall asleep. He's in the fourth watch of the night. And his whole crew is sleeping. And he found himself in a spot where no one else was there for him. And he prayed, God, if there's any way for us to do this so that I don't have to go to the cross, let's go with that plan. And no one bailed him out. And then he got on the cross. And he said that famous prayer, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now, there's a huge theological Bible study to have about that phrase and about whether or not God truly forsook Jesus. But we do know is that he did feel every bit of alone that he said he felt. And the reason he went through that, the reason the gospel cost him to that extent, the reason why he had to deal with the hardest moment in his life completely alone, was so that no one else in the history of the world would have to again. He didn't bail on us when he had a chance to get out of the cross. He's not bailing on you just because you're in the fourth watch of the night, laying awake in bed, worried about your kids, wondering if your kids are going to get the right education or learn how to read or how to date the right person or whatever you might be worrying about. You're not the only one in the room, and you're not the only person who feels it. And the reason why we never have to go through that alone is because Jesus did go through his alone. And so, if we do have a hope like this in Jesus Christ, why don't we live into it? Why don't we lean into that and say, God, I don't care if I'm way up here or way down here. It is you who I want. I'm hanging my hat on you. And Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. That's the invitation to Christian, non-Christian, believer, non-believer, skeptic, everyone. It's all the same invitation. Come to Jesus Christ. And the reason this church exists is to help introduce you to this man who will never let you down. I'll let you down. Your friends will let you down. Your family will let you down. You'll feel completely alone sometimes. But Jesus Christ will never let you down. Come to him if it's the last thing you do. Father, thank you for this day.